White Noise is Netflix's latest movie release, and it's safe to say that we went on an epic journey where we almost ended up in the same spot as where we were at the beginning. Focusing on the fear of death, misinformation, and the speed at which it spreads, along with the predictability of human nature, this movie provided over 2 hours of navigating through different styles, levels of comfortableness due to the visual and audible experience, and an ending that was quite literally left up to interpretation. So with that, I thought I'd recap, break down, and explain all that there was to take away from this movie. So let's get into it. Here is White Noise Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. This movie was split into 3 sections that each related to what we saw unfolding on our screens and represented the main thing that was at play. For example, the first section was called Waves and Radiation. The second was called the airborne toxic event, which saw us focus on the crash and the toxic cloud in the sky that was causing the town to evacuate. And the third section was called Dylarama, which in short was Dylar, the mystery pill that Babette was taking that us along with Jack wanted to find out what it was. As we embarked on the final section of the movie, we saw that the fear of death was something that was prominent throughout the entirety of it, but it really reached its peak in the final third. We had Babette, who was on Dylar, a placebo-type medication where it was supposed to help with the intrusive thoughts and the fear of dying. We had Jack, who was being told that he had around 30 years left to live, but the clock had already started ticking and speeding up, which then started to drive him to the point where he wanted to lose the fear of death and get on Dylar. And we had many others around them not caring at all, such as the doctors who were almost laughing it off, and Murray, who was oblivious to much of what was going on around him when they were at Camp Daffodil. The anxieties of life, death, and tragic events were each handled differently by all of the different characters, and it was a true representation of what society is like. People have different fears and different levels of them, and we had a window to look inside of a postmodern family where all of them had their quirks. Even down to the point and the extremity of where we saw Jack go and meet Mr. Grey, and Babette knew that he would be there, because as she said, "You're a guy, I knew you'd be jealous," which he was. He couldn't shake the feeling of Babette being with Mr. Grey outside of his head, which is why he felt it was necessary to become the Maker and decide who lived and died. With both Babette, Jack, and Mr. Grey all being harmed due to the confrontation, we saw them all in the hospital bed being tended to by German nuns, where they then realized that death was something that's part of life, and what they have in front of them is worth living for and giving their main focus. Their family, their home, and all that they've created is worth being present for in this life, rather than worrying about death that's inevitably one day on the cards. And I feel this was symbolized by them seeing the light as it shone through the window. The movie finished off in the supermarket, the all too perfect one that we saw several times throughout the movie. A place where death was never really discussed other than when Denise was informing her mother about the side effects to the different types of gum that she consumed. And even then, it was the one time that Babette didn't seem fazed about talking about death. Other than that, it was one of the only places where death wasn't present, and the capitalist, marketing-friendly, distraction-designed, and artistic nature of the way that the shelves were stacked was a way in which the family we came to know would subconsciously distract themselves from the dark thoughts that were present within their mind. Hence why the movie finished there. A somewhat happy ending, where you'd hope that death and the darkness of it would be something that would no longer be the main focus of the life that they were living. I believe that they came to the realization that they needed to change their mindset, and with that, despite the fact that they went through an ordeal of needing to evacuate the town and face death head on, they ended up back where they started, showing that life works in a funny way. Let's break the rest of this video down by the main characters at the ending. Jack. Jack was one half of the 2 main characters, and we saw him battle with the idea of death throughout the entirety of the movie. As much as it felt as though Babette was the person who vocalized her fear and she was the person who had the fear, it was just as present within Jack. We saw him hallucinating, having nightmares, and facing death on multiple occasions. He just kept it within him. Hence why we saw him always trying to distract himself or avoid the conversation that was focused on it, as we saw on the dinner table, and also when he was leaning over the ledge of the window in the attic and telling his son to get in because his mother worries, when deep down it was him. By the end of the movie, we saw that he was exposed to the chemicals that were in the sky, and that he'd been told by doctors that his clock was now ticking and that it was certain that he was going to die before Babette. But whilst it's implied that that was the case, the reality of life doesn't mean that it is, and the ending did a good job with that. There's nothing to say that Babette couldn't die before Jack. The doctors gave him an extremely long time, and a lot can happen within that time frame. With Jack facing death head on, the realization of just needing to live your life and to not be obsessed with something that may or may not be around the corner was something that he came to the realization of. Babette. Babette was the character that vocalized her fear of death and feared dying before her partner and being left on her own. So much so that we saw the movie center around her taking Dylarama, the pill that was supposed to remove the fear of death. And she went about this by cheating on her husband, somebody she cared deeply about, in order to get a supply of them. By the end of the movie, we saw her reach her peak when she told Jack about Mr. Grey, but in the end of the movie, we saw that she, just like her husband, was ready to try her best to push the fear down inside of her. And whether or not it was going to be as prominent as what it once was, she was going to focus on living with her husband who she believed was going to die before her, something that we know is not the case. I thought this movie was pretty good. It was a confusing ride to start with, but the more it went on, the more it started to make sense, in a weird way. Stylistically, it was incredible on the eye. The lighting, grading, set design, visual effects, and the decision to shoot on film made this movie feel like a world that didn't exist. But whilst it felt like that, it also felt extremely familiar. A place you'd only be able to experience by looking through a window that led to this family. So I thought it created an extremely surreal world. The dark undertones mixed with elements of jump scares, suspense, and personification of death was extremely clever and had me on the edge of my seat on several occasions. There was an over-the-top nature that felt unrealistic, but it matched the style that it was going for completely. The use of not blocking out background conversation and it feeling extremely present in your ears just as the main dialogue was, helped emphasize the sense of panic, spreading of misinformation, and it made you feel uncomfortable as a viewer. All of the cast delivered their roles well, with Adam Driver delivering a second-to-none performance as per usual, and Greta Gerwig smashing her role too. This was a dark movie that felt like everything happened, but also nothing did, and I think it's impressive to leave a viewer feeling like that. So as Netflix movies go, this is definitely one of the better ones. So, there you have it. White Noise Ending Explained. If you want to see more videos such as Endings Explained, theories and predictions, and character breakdowns, then click on the I button. Or alternatively, you can head over to my channel where you'll find them all. If you'd like to give me a show or movie that you'd like me to review, then head over to my Twitter, @brainpilot_, and tweet me what show or movie you'd like me to review next. And finally, if you'd like to see what I rate the latest movies that don't quite make the cut to getting a dedicated video, then head over to my Letterboxd profile. It's where I rate the latest releases in real time. What did you think of this movie? Leave a comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.